Hello and warm welcome to Your Career. Ahead on the show, we'll find out the secret to effective meetings, and we'll speak to best-selling author of The Third Plate, Dan Barber, about how he went from New York chef to sustainability superstar. But first, according to a global study, nearly half of the world's employees are unhappy at work, with many rating it as only slightly more enjoyable than being sick in bed. Now, this is despite evidence that happy employees are 12% more productive and improve a company's bottom line. It's a lot of misery considering most of us spend a lot of our time at work. Today is the International Day of Happiness, so to share how you can bring more joy into your working life, we're joined by positive psychology expert Michelle McQuaid. She's joining us from our Melbourne studio. And in the studio with us, Dr. Tim Sharp, CEO of the Happiness Institute. You may know him from Twitter as Dr. Happy. And Jill Livesey from the Institute of Executive Coaching and Leadership. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Pleasure.
I might kick it off with you guys in the studio with me. Tim, in terms of being happy at work, do you need to be happy to be successful?
Look, I think it depends how you define happy and depends how you define successful. The simple answer is probably no. There are lots of people out there who don't necessarily love what they do but still achieve good results. But I would say if we define happiness properly and success, certainly over the long term, then it undoubtedly helps.
And Jill, I mean, I know a lot of sort of successful people who hate their jobs. Is it about longevity, being able to sustain it?
Well, I think, again, it's that success. You've got professional success and personal success. And if you are hitting the numbers, delivering the outcomes at work, but you're really not enjoying it, then there's going to be a cost for that for you personally. So I think if you were working with someone around their career, I'd suggest they look at what are the bits that they enjoy in their role that's contributing to that success, and then transfer them to something you do like.
Michelle, I might get your view just on the link that you see between happiness and success at work.
Look, it definitely helps, and I do think it's a sustainability issue. I work with lots of large organisations around Australia, government departments, schools and the like. It's very hard to stay in our jobs when we're not enjoying them. It's hard to show up with the energy that we might need to be successful long term in them, and it starts to impact everybody else around us as well, not just at work but at home. So look, I think happiness, particularly when it's feeling good and being able to function effectively, definitely helps to be more successful at work.
Michelle, whose responsibility is it to foster the happiness at work though?
Look, ultimately, I think this comes down to each of us as employees. While it would be nice to think our organisations and managers are doing things to help us be happier and create better environments for us. And again, we see a growing number of companies around Australia starting to invest in this. But at the end of the day, it's your life. No point turning up every day to something that's making you unhappy. You don't have to quit your job to be happier. Lots of very simple, tested things that you can do to bring a little bit more joy into your work.
Michelle, what are some of the other things you can do to contribute to happiness at work?
Look, one of the biggest things we're finding, we just conducted the 2015 Strengths at Work survey, is that employees who report actually know what their strengths are, the things they like doing and they're good at, and they have a chance, even for small moments, to do a little bit of that each day, feel not only more engaged and energised, they feel like what they're doing is making a difference and appreciated, and most importantly, they're the most likely employees to describe themselves as flourishing. So figure out what you're good at and enjoy doing, see if you can find some small ways to just start doing a little more of that each day.
Tim, I mean, whose responsibility do you think it is at work in order to foster happiness? Is it up to the individual or is it up to the employer?
Firstly, apologies, I couldn't hear the beginning of what Michelle said, but I would say it's both. I spent a lot of time talking to leaders and managers about how to build a positive culture that fosters happiness and productivity at work. So there's no doubt that the executive team, that the people at the top can make a big difference by creating the right sort of environment that allows for that to happen. But there's also no doubt that every one of us, no matter what our position, no matter what our title, no matter how high or low, every one of us, when we walk in the door in the morning of our office building, of our workplace, we have an influence over the culture. and it's up to us to choose what sort of influence we want to have. So I think it's everyone's role, whether you have a title or not.
Right, because we contribute to our colleagues' happiness as well.
Undoubtedly, the way we interact, the way we greet someone, whether we say thank you or not, whether we help out other people, all those little things add up. And I think one of the things I commonly see is people underestimate those little things.
Jill, just in terms of a leadership perspective, you know, as a CEO or even a leader in your team, is it your responsibility to help foster some of that happiness and I guess a good culture in the environment?
Look, I agree with these guys. It's certainly both as a responsibility, and also, you know, the importance of the role of a manager to the happiness, engagement of their employees is really significant. They play a big part. And, you know, the kinds of quality of conversations that your manager has with you, interested in your future aspirations, interested in your learning goals, I think that does make a big difference. I think it's really important.
Tim, do perks of the job help? I mean, in terms of some of the, you know, you hear people, some of the Google offices, for example, have ping pong tables and video games and things like that. Has that actually been proven to help in happiness of an employee?
Look, it's very hard when you look at cultural surveys or organisation surveys to tease out bits and pieces. You hear a lot, as you said, about the famous examples like Google, where there's free food and all sorts of wonderful things. I don't think those things hurt, but I think what's important to note is that we get used to that sort of stuff very quickly. And people get used to the free food, they get used to the ping pong table. So I would argue that in the longer term, those aren't the most crucial things. The most important things are the relationships we have with our managers, with our colleagues. The most important things is the extent to which we find fulfilment and satisfaction, meaning in what we do. Those things are going to go much deeper, you know, than a cupcake for morning tea.
So is it about flexibility then, Jill, in terms of employers giving their employees some flexibility as well in terms of work-life balance?
I think flexibility is certainly important, and I think it's important. The ping pong table, etc. It's what sits around that, what supports it. And if someone goes to play on the ping pong table and their manager walks past and scowls, you know, that's really, you know, your worst case. Interestingly, when I was invited to come on the programme, I was just walking into my local supermarket and I asked very bright young woman on the checkout, I said, so for you, what matters to you? What's the single thing that makes a difference to your happiness at work? And she said feedback. She didn't miss a beat. She said feedback. And I said, well, do you get that? And she said, if things go wrong, yeah, we get a lot, but no one ever tells us we did a good job.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. That might be one for Michelle. Michelle, positive feedback, is that really important to a happy culture at work?
It's huge. Look, I think gratitude is probably one of the most underutilised business tools we have today. And it doesn't have to take a lot of effort, doesn't have to even be Employee of the Month schemes, doesn't require budget to do. Just a, hey, thanks. But not just thanks for that, you did a good job. Tell them why they did a good job and what you appreciated about it. That way they know how to do more of it and they walk away feeling confident that they can do that for you.
Tim, can you learn this sort of attitude if people around you don't necessarily have this attitude? Because you can't always control what other people do, but you can control yourself, right?
Yeah, definitely. So the simple answer is yes, you can learn it, just like you can learn pretty much anything else in life. It's a skill or a set of skills, and if we learn what to do, practice on a regular basis, put the effort in, then we can certainly get better. At the same time, there are some people that are always going to find it a bit easier or harder than others. So, you know, not all of us will become Olympic gold medalists in the happiness stakes, but we can actually get better, and that's all that counts really, as long as we're all trying. I mean, imagine if every single person in the organisation was just trying a little bit each day.
So what are those things? What are some of those things you can do on a day-to-day basis? Yeah.
Well, as we heard actually a bit already, expressing gratitude is one of the simplest things, but one of the most underestimated and underutilised. We know that managers who are grateful tend to have higher levels of engagement from their people. They get more productivity. Just saying thank you on a regular basis, coming in with the right sort of attitude, finding meaning and purpose, helping people understand that the work they do goes beyond just the day-to-day tasks. And certainly one of the things that is really, really important, I was just talking to a group in Melbourne yesterday about, was utilising our strengths. Too many of us spend too much time trying to fix all our weaknesses in the workplace. Less than 20% of employees feel they have the opportunity to utilise their strengths every day. But those that do use their strengths, those things that they're best at, tend to outperform their colleagues in every regard. So, you know, if you put all those bits and pieces together, it makes a massive difference.
Jill, what if you have a sort of mundane job and you don't have many exciting tasks to do? Can you still, do you think, find happiness? I mean, in terms of, what do you see about that?
Well, I guess the first thing is one person's mundane is another person's interesting, thankfully.
That's true.
And, you know, there's a whole litany of examples where somebody who, you know, they bring a great attitude and they play to their strengths, and they have what on the surface it might seem to be not that interesting a job, and they have great impact. You know, Seligman, in his book Authentic Happiness, he talks about the hospital worker who empties bedpans, I think, you know, and he engages with each person each patient, and people look forward to him, you know, to him visiting. There's the lollipop man, Mr. Harmony, at our local primary school. He greets every person that crosses that road as if they are the most important person, and people walk off with a spring in their step. So I think it's playing to your strengths and the attitude, absolutely. As you said, you can choose. Totally.
I might go back to you for a minute, Michelle, because good question for a sort of psychology expert. Money and happiness, we always hear these two terms sort of intertwined. Do they have a link in the workplace?
Look, the research on that is suggesting that while money can definitely be important, it doesn't ultimately determine our happiness. As Tim's touched on, it tends to be things more like our relationships, particularly with our bosses, but also with our colleagues, that sense of meaning and purpose. Do we feel appreciated and valued for what we've done? Now, that said, of course, if we feel like we're being underpaid and undervalued, that's certainly not going to contribute to our happiness long term. But actually, money has far less impact on our happiness than lots of us think it does, and so we mistakenly chase after the money, thinking that's where the happiness will lie, only to find ourselves getting there and going, is that it? Like, where do I go next?
So as expected, Michelle saying not much of a link there. Tim, I'm sure you would agree with that.
Apologies again, I couldn't hear Michelle. But well, what we know from the research is that as long as people feel they're being paid a fair and reasonable wage, so that is important. If someone feels they're being underpaid, that brings an element of dissatisfaction that's that's relevant to this discussion. Yeah. But as long as we're getting a fair and reasonable wage, then above and beyond that isn't nearly as important as what a lot of people think. The other factors we've talked about, like recognition and appreciation, are far more important when it comes to satisfaction at work in the longer term.
So do you see that as well in terms of what a leader needs to know and a CEO needs to know? Do they need to, watch pays? If people ask for pay rises and bonuses, do they need to manage that expectation to keep people happy in the workplace?
Well, I think, as has previously been said, certainly there's the law of diminishing returns, and beyond your subsistence, that certainly declines. And people might focus on pay. If they feel like they're being paid fairly, they're going to focus on that the one time a year when they get their annual review. And beyond that, I think it's all of those other things that we've talked about that people are going to care more about.
All right, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Always a lot to talk about in this discussion. Dr. Tim Sharp, founder of the Happiness Institute, thank you so much. Jill Livesey from the Institute of Executive Coaching and Leadership, and also positive psychology expert Michelle McQuaid. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
We do need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be back with an insight into the career and philosophy of food expert American chef Dan Barber. That's next.